Dear God in heaven, we thank you for your great love towards us. We thank you for especially the leadership that you've given to us to help us to learn the way that you would understand these very life and death issues that we have to go through, to see as you would have us to see what heaven is made up of. Help us to see it this side of the kingdom and know that we can have a little heaven on this earth. We please be with all of those that are listening this evening. We pray that they will hear what the Spirit saith. Please be with with Terrie as she presents, and that you will give her the words that we need to bring us to your kingdom. So we leave ourselves now in your care and keeping. To your glory and honour we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So we're going to start with a verse. We're going to start with 1 Corinthians chapter 14, 32 and 33. This is a verse we used to use a lot going back once upon a time. So 1 Corinthians 14, 32 and 33. And who would like to read that? Marilyn, I see your audio's on. Have you got it?
Yeah.
Thank you. If you could read that.
For ye may all prophesy one by one.
Sorry, Marilyn, 1 Corinthians 14, 32 and 33.
32 and 33. I thought, oh, that's 30, 32. Yeah, okay. And the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints.
Thank you. So could I have a volunteer to explain or put in their own words what verse 32 is saying? Just 32. Put in your own words what verse 32 is saying. What is Paul talking about? What does it mean? The spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets.
Is it witnesses? They're witnesses, so they're subject to them.
What does it mean then to be subject to them?
So that their witness will, they'll be a witness and confirm that what has been said is correct.
So how are they going to witness that what has been said is correct?
I guess they would be doing line upon line.
And what's the principle behind line upon line? Because all the prophets in the Bible aren't drawing lines on blackboards. What are they doing? You're right. I'm just trying to tease out a different answer. Keep going, Marie. So they're witnessing of each other by doing what?
They're repeating what has already been prophesied.
Yes. And what is our rule? What is the principle behind line upon line?
The witness of two or three, the testimony of two or three.
The testimony of two or three, something is established. That's the signature of God. So when it says that the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets, it means that they all agree. Moses is subject to Paul. Paul is subject to Hosea. Hosea is subject to Christ. Christ is subject to Ellen White. They all agree. I'm not putting Christ on the same level as Ellen White, but as a prophet, they all have to agree with each other. They're subject to one another. By the testimony of two, a thing is established. They, as you said, Marie, they are witnesses of one another by repeating it. And when they repeat it differently, but the principle is the same. They're saying the same thing in different words. So the spirits of the prophets, that is their message, agrees with another's message. For God is not the author of confusion. Let's do that here. God is not the author of confusion. Who is the author of confusion? I hear you all saying. So Satan is the author of confusion. What is God the author of? If he doesn't author
Peace.
confusion, what does he author? Peace. So God is the author of peace. In fact, allow me to put it on top. What's the word in the Bible that we associate with confusion?
Babylon, Tower of Babel.
Yes, we get that confusion from the Tower of Babel, Babylon. Babylon means it's confusion, babbling. And so Babylon, you know what? I haven't given myself way enough room. I'm going to have to start this again. Okay, then what is the word that I'm going to place up here on this line?
Jerusalem.
Why, Catherine?
Because it's got the word peace in it, like shalom.
City of peace. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They that prosper shall serve thee. Peace be within thy walls and thy palaces. Okay, city of peace. So we want to know more about Babylon, that we looked at the Tower of Babel. So I'm going to be mean and I'm going to pick on Lynn, because Lynn and I had a conversation recently. So I'm hoping it comes to your memory, Lynn. Lynn, walk us through the definition of Babylon. I want 3 verses.
Okay. So first of all, we wanted to identify what Babylon was. And from memory, that was that great city. And we can go to Revelation 14:8 for that. Do you want me to read that?
No, you can tell us.
The
So
verse actually,
Revelation 14:8.
okay. So Revelation 14:8 is basically just talking about there followed another angel, and then it's saying that Babylon is fallen, that great city. So therefore, that's how we can determine Babylon is that great city. And then we go back to Revelation 16, and we go further down in that chapter first, just to get a little bit more information about what that city was. And that was in Revelation 16:19. In there, it talks about the great city being divided into 3 parts, and that was important. So then there was the third one. You go further back into verse 16. Still, it was 16:13, and there it describes what the three parts are. And it talks about the unclean frogs, but basically what we've got is, this is the identification of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So we know that
Awesome,
three
Lynn.
parts of Babylon were really divided into those three parts.
Dragon, beast, and I'll just write this for room. False prophet. The
Yeah,
three
false prophet.
parts of that great city. Thank you. Excellent work. Okay, so Babylon means confusion, and when we look further, it's divided into three parts. Now, 1 Corinthians 14:32 said, and the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets. So God's prophets agree. If God's got prophets in Jerusalem, Satan's got prophets in Babylon, and what will characterize Satan's prophets?
They will agree.
They will agree, or they won't agree.
Well, I said they will agree because it's copying off, he's always copying off God's kingdom, but they probably won't when I think about it.
What does Babylon mean?
Confusion.
So do you think they're going to agree or not agree?
And not agree.
They're not going to agree. That's why there's confusion. Why was there confusion in the Tower of Babel? Because they're all saying different things. So if you think of the Great Controversy, when Ellen White talks about the dragon will reach its arm, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact order, but one reaches their arm across the chasm and the other reaches their arms across an abyss. That means that they have profound differences between them. They are going to unify for a brief period of time, but it'll only be brief, but there are profound differences. So between the three, there are disagreements. They do not agree. They don't give witness to each other. And within themselves, they have disagreements. But when we looked at Daniel 8, we divided these up into three religions. So the religion of the dragon, remember, is spiritualism. The beast is Catholicism. False prophet is apostate Protestantism. And there are profound chasms, abysses between them. Even though we've got mum and daughter, they don't agree. They are going to unify on something, though. So the spirits of Satan's prophets are not subject one to another. So what we want to make clear is that when we looked at the counterfeit in Daniel chapter 8, we saw that the counterfeit runs close to the truth. So we see things like self-promotion, self-exaltation, and what was the other? Self-preservation, are all characteristics of Satan's kingdom, and it is a counterfeit of God's kingdom. But in God's kingdom, it's not self that gets promoted, it's not self that gets exalted, and it's not self that preserves. Okay, God does all of those for his people. So we looked at the counterfeit. So when we come to here, when we're looking at these, we understand that each of these is a counterfeit. When we did Daniel 8, we recognized that the spiritualism is the daily. It's the continual, the hatamid, the continual, the gadal, self-exaltation that was from the beginning and continues all the way through. And then we saw that Catholicism is just another version of the daily as well, of daily, and so is apostate Protestantism. So the daily is going to continue through, but it will get called different names. When it becomes Catholicism, it's going to be called the abomination that maketh desolate. But it's just another version of the daily, the continual. All of these entities are beasts. So the dragon is a beast. The false prophet is a beast. It's the lamb-like beast. And this one is the beast. So a dragon is a beast. False prophet is a beast. And we have the beast. The only difference is in their names, in the sense that these are common nouns and that's a proper noun. That they're all beasts, like they're all the daily, they just have different versions of their names and manifest themselves differently, but they are essentially have the same characteristics of a counterfeit. So they are all counterfeits. They are all explained in Daniel chapter 8. So the dragon is a counterfeit. The false prophet is a counterfeit. And this one is the counterfeit. So I just want to I try and make clear that they're all counterfeits. It's just that we focus on a lot on the counterfeit, but they are all counterfeits. It's just like the dragon is the daily, and yet they're all daily. Any thoughts? Ray?
Elder Terrie, is it, should we think of the two, like the dragon and the false prophet, as like a copy of a copy? You know, so like if you have the first copy, it would be like fairly close to the original, but then each subsequent copy is going to get less and less accurate. Does that make sense? Or is that not really a right way to think?
Think of it more like children. If you look at a family, you can look at the children and go, you can tell who their parents are. The children look like mum and dad, but they look different to each other. There's similarities.
Yeah, right.
So you wouldn't call one child more of a child of its parents than the other child. You can look at those children and you know where they've come from, even though there's differences. Does
that makes
help?
sense. Yeah, thank you.
If we consider Jerusalem and we think of the three persons of the Godhead, think of, and I'll use the biblical terms, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Bible says God is spirit. So the Father is spirit. The Son is spirit who dwells in a temple of flesh, the incarnation. And there is the Holy Spirit, proper noun. When we talk about the Father being spirit, we use a common noun. When we talk about the Holy Spirit, it becomes a proper noun. A little bit of grammar on the end of a long week. It's a bit of a pain, isn't it? But we do that in different ways with other things as well. We have to be able to recognize when something is a proper noun and when something is a common noun. So when we're looking at atheism, we're looking at something that comes under the heading of the dragon, under the umbrella of the dragon. that the dragon will have numerous examples of itself, of the daily. It is a beast power. It is a counterfeit. So as we're looking at atheism, we're looking at a counterfeit. It is going to be counterfeiting God's kingdom, but it's not the counterfeit in the sense when we study, say, the Midnight Cry message, or the movements that this term uses. So we understand that the false prophet is also a counterfeit. So when we're looking at atheism, we should be able to see aspects, characteristics of what we're studying that are mimicking God's kingdom, just in a different way, like it's a different child than the counterfeit does. So any thoughts?
No,
Is that
but you
clear?
also answered another question I was going to ask, which is what would be the 3 parts of Jerusalem? So thank you.
Okay. So when we consider Ted Wilson's sermon, and really the main focus of the mainstream Seventh-day Adventist church, it focuses on the counterfeit and doesn't really see what's happening with the other counterfeits as well. So we know that they're all going to join hands across the chasms and across the abysses, but they don't agree. And like the Tower of Babel, it will all come crashing down because they can't keep it up. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say there. So atheism. Seeing we're talking about atheism. Oops. No. Just share screen. This is an article from the National Geographic. It's from 2016, and it says the world's newest major religion is no religion. As secularism grows, atheists and agnostics are trying to expand and diversify their ranks. Okay, so we'll just read a little bit. You don't usually think of churches as going out of business, but it happens. In March, driven by parishioner deaths and lack of interest, the UK Mennonites held their last collective service. It might seem easy to predict that plain dressing Anabaptists who follow a faith related to the Amish would become irrelevant in the age of smartphones, but this is part of a larger trend. Around the world, when asked about their feelings on religion, more and more people are responding with a meh. The religiously unaffiliated, called nones, are growing significantly. They're the second largest religious group in North America and most of Europe. In the United States, nones make up almost a quarter of the population. In the past decade, US nones have overtaken Catholics, mainline Protestants, and all followers of non-Christian faiths. So this is a group that's worth taking notice of. They're a large group. So it shows some maps here, how it's growing and where it's not. So it's not growing in Africa. And it will go on to explain why parts of the world it's not growing. And I'll just, atheism's diversity problem. So as atheism grows as its own movement, it is not cohesive, as we read in a study last time, and it is very much white. The Centre for Inquiry in Washington, DC hosts a regular happy hour called Drinking Skeptically. On a Wednesday in late March, about a dozen people showed up to faithlessly imbibe and all but one were white. And this will go on to explain how it's largely a white movement. The secularizing West, they will talk about. And here it will say the privilege of not believing. So why, well, let me read. There are a few theories about why people become atheists in large numbers. Some demographers attribute it to financial security, which would explain why European countries with a stronger social safety net are more secular than the United States, where poverty is more common and a medical emergency can bankrupt even the insured. Atheism is also tied to education, measured by academic achievement. Atheists in many places tend to have college degrees or general knowledge of the panoply of beliefs around the world. Hence, theories that internet access spurs atheism. So the more people get educated and the more they have financial security, the less they need God. So we see that more in Western nations. The other thing is, and a talk here about women. Around the world, the Pew Research Centre finds that women tend to be more likely to affiliate with a religion and more likely to pray and find religion important in their lives. And why is that? Lack of religion, lack of education, and lack of financial security. So fewer have economic opportunities and less exposure to a worldview that does not require the presence of God. So religion has a place for women, people of colour, and the poor. By its nature, secularism is open to all, but it's not always as welcoming. And then it will go on to talk about the humanist movement's most visible figures, which we've talked about, Elder Tess has talked about in Vespers, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens. They're not welcoming to women. So, stop share. So there's just an interesting article that shows the growth of atheism and knowns across the world. The dragon power is large and influential. It is white and male, largely. So what we've been looking at when we consider this counterfeit is one aspect, one particular outgrowth of the dragon, and it involves three parts: philosophy, technology, sorry, that'll help, and elites. Or, as that article said, the privileged, those with money. And they come together and they are going to influence politics. So when we consider these together, so one of the things that we can establish through Daniel chapter 8 is this is a religion. They might not call themselves religion, they might be anti-religion, but it is a religious movement, and we've proven that, and we'll continue to do that. But this religion movement is kind of got its own trinity. And so we were talking about long-termism. So we'll go back to there. And I'll just, if anybody wants to take a picture of that, I'm just about to rub it out. 1, 2, 3. So what we started looking at last time was the philosophy. So we can continue looking at the philosophy today, and then hopefully get onto the technology next time. So the philosophy, and we went back into the 1970s. we remind ourselves of a study that we from 2021 about atheism. It said a new study suggests that while atheists and theists share moral values related to protecting vulnerable individuals, atheists are less likely to endorse values that promote group cohesion, so they don't really stick together, and more inclined to judge the morality of actions based on their consequences. So this is a philosophy called consequentialism, and the particular thread of that, we're looking at utilitarianism. So utilitarianism is an ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. It's a form of consequentialism. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. So basically, as human beings, we all have utility. We have something that we can give or contribute. And so what utilitarians want to do is whatever will create the greatest utility for the world, the universe, the cosmos. That is what you work towards. So utilitarianism has its roots in the 18th century, but we went back to the father of modern utilitarianism, to Peter Singer. Peter Singer was an Oxford philosopher, so he's considered a living legend among philosophers. When you take on philosophy, I guess it's like any career. When you take on a career, you want to do something in your career that will stand out. If you're a philosopher, you want to come up with at least one exceptional thought that people will grab hold of. Peter Singer came up with 3. So he's known for 3 consequential thoughts that philosophies or beliefs that have had a profound influence on academics, atheists or otherwise, from when he wrote them. So in 1971, he wrote Famine, Affluence and Morality, and we talked about that. Famine, Affluence and Morality. And the key thought was that people in rich countries are morally obliged to give away a big portion of their income to people from poor countries. So distance means nothing. If somebody was drowning, his pond parable is if somebody was drowning in front of you, you wouldn't think twice about getting your good suit and your shoes dirty. Then if people are starving in Bengal, then you should be able to give the equivalent of that at least to help people. Distance means nothing. So, and all that sounds really good. It's this thinking actually spurred on the international aid agencies. So there was international aid with the United Nations, but this spurred on more secular groups, non-religious groups to take part in international aid as well. This is not without its critics. There are a lot of people that see international aid as doing more harm than good. This is not something that was accepted by everyone for certain. So the other book in 1975 was called Animal Liberation. And does anybody remember the thought that Peter Singer came up, that he expanded on in his book, Animal Liberation?
I'll say what I remember of it. he said that there are people, but not everybody's actually equal. Some people have maybe more skills, or some are disabled or whatever. So there's different levels of people. And then he went into like that all are able to suffer. And so therefore, you know, because animals are able to suffer, you need to treat them equally. So not, it's their ability to suffer is the reason why you have to treat them well. It's not because of their like inherent value, is what I kind of picked up from what he was saying.
Yes, very good. He called it speciesism. Sure, I've spelled that right. Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, very, very good. So in effect, what he's doing is confusing real differences with false differences. I don't want to go back into that at all, but this is what spurred on the animal liberation movement, and also spurred on to him to think more about what you were just saying, Catherine, is what actually makes people people and animals animal, what the differentiates. He's going to continue to write on that. And in 1979, he's going to write a book called Practical Ethics. And in that, he's going to discuss personhood. What makes a person? And he will say that a person, that not all humans are persons. In order to be a person and to deserve moral considerations, beings must be self-aware and capable of perceiving themselves as individuals through time. So if you're, let's consider abortion. So a fetus is not self-aware, so it is not a person. So parents, mothers should have the choice to abort the fetus if that's their choice, because it's not a person. But then he would go on to say that an infant is also not a person. They do not have self-awareness. They don't understand themselves as an individual in time. And so if a parent could make the decision to abort a fetus before its birth, then they could make the decision, if the child was born with terrible disabilities, that that child could also be killed after birth until they reached the age of personhood. So he got himself into a whole lot of trouble with that one. There were massive demonstrations in 1989, actually, and I remember those in Germany. So he would also argue that somebody with advanced dementia is not a person too. So he defined what was person, what made a person. Now he wasn't saying that all, you know, that it's okay to kill a child, because as a utilitarian, you would say don't kill that child because it would upset the parents. That would do harm to the parents. So it's the parents' choice of whether they want to keep the born child, not for any moral reason for the child itself. So 3 major thoughts that are going to have a large impact going forward. You cannot underestimate the work of Peter Singer amongst intellectual elites, especially at Oxford, but across the world. So we're going to come down in time. Actually, I'll just quote Peter Singer. Killing a defective infant is not morally equivalent to killing a person. Sometimes it is not wrong at all. That's a quote from Practical Ethics. you can imagine the people with disabilities were very upset and still are with Peter Singer's conclusions. So all of this tied together, especially this book, Famine, Affluence and Morality, is going to have a profound effect on students of philosophy going forward. And we're going to look at a few of those. He has, his work is going to create a lot of think tanks, groups within academia, and eventually this is going to develop into the effective altruism movement, or EA. So I'll just write it up here. Actually, I'll write it up here. Effective altruism. And we want to look at a few individuals, philosophers, that were the most influenced by Peter Singer and are have created their own influence. So the first one we're going to look at, talked about them before, is we're going to come down to 2009. And there are two individuals. We mentioned them a few weeks back, William McCaskill and I want to say Benjamin Ord, but I've got his Toby Ord, sorry, Toby Ord. So Toby Ord, William McCaskill, young philosophers at Oxford. And they are going to take Peter Singer's work and create a charity called Giving What We Can. And effectively, what they realized was that altruism is nothing new. Altruism is selflessness. It's giving. It's disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. Right, so that's nothing new. What is new is being effective about it, taking utilitarian beliefs, taking that to altruism to bring the most good out of charitable giving. So if we're going to take Peter Singer's parable about the pond, then, and we want to help people overseas, because all their help would be largely in third world countries, then we have to look at the most effective way to do that. So they coined the term effective altruism. And they started I don't know if you can call it a charity. We'll call it a charity, I guess. It's called Giving What You Can. Now, how are they going to encourage people to take on Peter Singer's philosophy? How are they going to encourage people to give what they can? Any ideas what? Oh, sorry, I've missed some. Molly, you had your hand up?
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask a question because it sounds like you based his thesis on the Darwinism. Like,
oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a natural extension of Darwinism. We're all animals. So if we're all animals, we should care for each other, and hence, speciesism. And we have to actually determine then between the animals, and And that's where he came up with personhood. So there's threads that run through his thinking. Doesn't pay to dwell on it too much, as just being aware of it. But there are others that have dwelt on it a lot, and it's going to develop, especially with online groups. Once you get I'm going to say chat groups, or what's the other one? Blogs. This is going to really, really grow. So giving what you can, they're trying to encourage students, people from these universities to be more effective, to first of all think about altruism and to be more effective about it. So any guesses about what their first thing is going to be to get people to give? It's a bad way to put the question. Did anybody do any research on them, on Toby Ord or William McCaskill? What's their idea, their first idea? We're going to encourage people to give. Lynn?
I haven't done any research on that, so I really don't know. So I'm just kind of taking a bit of a stab in the dark. But it seems to me that they're going to look at a marketing campaign, and they'd look at something like, I mean, I would imagine something like getting celebrities involved or something that's going to be popular. So that would be what I would imagine. But I'm kind of just, as I say, grasping at straws a little.
No, thank you. Eventually, yes, celebrities, people with money, etc., are going to get involved, but it's a sort of a ground movement amongst the universities at first, amongst the intellectual elites, and a clue is it's a counterfeit. Catherine, how are they going to counterfeit God's method?
So I haven't researched it, but I was going to guess that this is like, you can leave a legacy, and you can leave a legacy, and in that way you can like live forever.
Okay, good swing of the bat, yeah. How much legacy, Catherine? Like each week, what would you give? What are they telling people to give?
Oh, 1/10, of course.
Yeah. They want you to give 10% of your income. These atheists, who would ever have thought? So this is where it starts. Pledge 10% of your income. They thought that was a pretty good way to start. Actually, I might be able to bring that up. So here's the giving what you can for a Wikipedia page. The shared ground of all giving it's giving what we can, not you can, members, is that they have committed to providing at least 10% of their income by signing the pledge. Therefore, members often refer to themselves as pledges. We don't sign pledges, do we? What do we have? What is the pledge counterfeiting?
Vows.
The vows, yes. The pledge is a voluntary and non-legal commitment to donate 10% of one's income. Then you can further pledge, though. Founder Toby Ord further pledged to donate anything he earned over £20,000 a year, based on his conviction that he could live comfortably and happily on this income. So that's another thing they call the further pledge. So you work out what you can live on, and then whatever is above that, you give. So some give more than the 10, but the minimum is the 10. So giving what you can. When we come down to 2015, I'll just write it down here. They're going to start up, this is connected, it's called 80,000 hours. 80,000 hours, that is the amount of time that you're probably going to spend in your career. So this was a counselling, I don't know if counselling is the right word, but this arm of the EA movement was to help students in their career choice. If you want to be an effective altruist, then you won't be as effective going to work for a charity as you would going to work at Wall Street or a petrochemical company or earning big money. So if you can get into a job that you can earn big money, you will be able to be more effective in your altruism. So they would guide people in their career choices where they could be more effective. So there's two things. So they're telling people, minimum of asking people to sign the pledge. It's voluntary. And people are getting on board because you want to do good, sounds good. It's not asking that much. 10% is not asking a lot of people, and that's what they recognize. But when you get people to give, there's two things you want them to not do, not consider when you give. So what would be the two reasons that we would give? Why do we give? Oh, Graham?
I was answering something previous. I wasn't trying to answer this one.
Okay. What were you going to say, Graham?
Before, when Catherine was answering, I was going to say time. So I thought that it was the movement first started on giving time and then money, but I was incorrect.
No, that's because the time's going to come here, but it's where you're going to put your time. Your time might be more effective in a career that's going to make more money. So thank you, Graham. Okay, so if you're going to give, there are two reasons why we give, and they want you to not give because of those two reasons, because those two reasons are not effective. So why do we give? Any thoughts of why? What makes you give?
When there's a need, somebody need help.
What makes, yes, so there's a need. That need has affected how has that need prompted you to give?
Especially if I'm able.
Out of love.
Out of love. Out of your emotions.
Emotion, yeah.
Yes.
People give as an emotional response. Atheists say, no, that's bad. That's not effective. You see a need, Molly, and you go, oh, that makes me feel like I should do something. That's not effective to an effective altruist. So we give because it tugs on our emotions. Love, sympathy, empathy. The other reason we give, think about this. Why do we give? What's this tied to for us? Sorry, Molly?
It's a moral obligation.
That morality has come from where?
From the Bible.
And the Bible is? What do atheists not believe in?
The word of God.
God said. God said for us to give a 10.
Yes, yes. You're all right. I'm thinking of the word religion. So you're all right. We give because of our religion or we give because of emotions. People across the world, either they give because it's emotionally pulled on them or because of religion. And atheists say that is bad giving. That is ineffective giving. We want you to give, but not because of religion and not because of your emotions. So how are they, what are they going to use in its place? What are they going to replace religion and emotions with? And they're going to replace it with mathematics. So to be effective, they're going to use a lot of mathematical tools to work out what is the most effective giving. And we've already done a little bit of grammar tonight, so we're not going to do any math because it'll make your head hurt. But there are all these probability calculuses. And what's the other one? They're going to use reason and evidence and I'm just trying to expected value calculus. So there are probability calculuses, expected value calculus. Expected value calculus actually is something that is used all the time. It's used by insurance companies. It's used by the medical industry, in institutions. So you work out the probability, the possibility of something happening like a fire or a flood, and how often it's happened in the past. You put all those numbers into your formula and you come up with an expected value calculus. And there's all these probability formulas, and they use mathematics to work out how to be the most effective in the giving. So they look at data, they look at, yes, they use reason. It has to do, it's not, mathematics has the authority. So I just, so EA really came into its own in 2012. And I'll read a little from William McCaskill's book. He says, this is a story he tells. In 2009, while germinating the concept of effective altruism, he visited a hospital in Ethiopia that treats obstetric fistulas, a condition resulting from childbirth in young and a condition resulting from childbirth in young and malnourished women that causes permanent incontinence of urine and or feces. According to the Fistula Foundation, which funds the hospital, a majority of women who develop fistulas are abandoned by their husbands and ostracized by their communities because of their foul smell. At the hospital, McCaskill met some of the women who suffered from the condition. But several years later, he concluded that although the organisation was repairing fistulas at low cost and saving these young women from terrible fates, others working on different issues were making a bigger impact, and that they should get his donations instead. And that the methods that he used, the mathematical calculations that he used to determine that impact were described in his book. He laid out all the formulas and the reasons for not donating to this, but donating to something else. You can imagine the Fistula Foundation were very upset, because actually a lot of his calculation, the information he was using was erroneous. And because of his decision in his book, it took a lot of donations away from their charity. According to the Fistula Foundation, which funds the hospital, a majority of women who develop fistulas are abandoned by their husbands. Oh, I read that. At the hospital, McCaskill explains that by donating to the Fistula Foundation instead of a different organisation, he thought he would be privileging the needs of some people over others merely because I happen to know them. So he didn't want to use his emotions. Just because I've known them and I've met them and I've seen it, I must not let that affect my giving. I'll go home and do my mathematical equations. And that it was arbitrary that I'd seen this problem close up rather than any of the other problems in the world. So effective altruists admire the kind of cool rationality that considers personal attachments as arbitrary. So no personal attachments. They actually admire that resolve of people not to get personally attached or drawn into caregiving. So the importance of VA is to maximize how much good you can do. And as I said earlier, when we're talking about, especially about international aid, it's just not clear cut. So you can be thinking about how much you can get, how much you can get for your dollar, but it's not really considering the individual needs. And we'll look at that more. There'll be another example of that. So I've just introduced Toby Ord, William McCaskill. They're the founders of this EA movement. In 2021, Toby Ord wrote The Precipice. And in The Precipice, a precipice is you're standing on a cliff, you're about to go over and die. It's about existential threats, about the world is on the precipice of extinction. And we talked about that in an earlier studies. All the things that are troubling the world at the moment that could actually bring us to extinction. So he is now going to combine this idea of existential threats with effective altruism. And where did they get those ideas from? Let me introduce you to another philosopher that was heavily influenced by Peter Singer's work. And his name is Nick Bostrom. I'll put him back here. We can mark him, he's 2001, 2000. He's written over 200 books. So I'll mark this one as 2005. And Nick Bostrom. And I might just pull up the Wikipedia on him. Might be the easiest thing. We'll just have a little look at Nick. So, Oxford philosopher. He's actually from Sweden, but he is the author of over 200 publications, has written 2 books and co-edited 2 others. The book that we will be considering is Superintelligence. Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, Strategies. And he wrote that in 2014. It was a New York Times bestseller. So Bostrom, Superintelligence. So he is an EA, but his work is mostly on existential risks. Aspects of Bostrom's research concern the future of humanity and long-term outcomes. He discusses existential risk, which he defines as one in which an adverse outcome would either annihilate Earth-originating intelligent life or permanently and drastically curtail its potential. So he's the founder of Future of Humanity Institute, which we've looked at before too. 2005, Future of Humanity Institute. So we'll look at this book that he wrote in 2014. In 2014, the book Superintelligence, Paths, Dangers, Strategies, Bostrom reasoned that the creation of a superintelligence represents a possible means to the extinction of mankind. Bostrom argues that a computer with near human level general intellectual ability could initiate an intelligence explosion on a digital timescale with the resultant rapid creation of something so powerful that it might deliberately or accidentally destroy humanity. Bostrom contends the power of a superintelligence would be so great that a task given to it by humans might be taken to open-ended extremes. And then he'll give some examples. For example, a goal of calculating pi might collaterally cause nanotechnology manufactured facilities to sprout over the entire Earth's surface and cover it within days. He comes up with all these stories that could happen. He believes an existential risk to humanity from superintelligence would be immediate once brought into being, thus creating an exceeding difficult problem of finding out how to control such an entity before it actually exists. Okay, so he has, there's a couple of interesting things about Bostrom. He is also a transhumanist. So transhumanists believe that we're transitioning because of evolution. Okay, so we're human, but we're in a transitioning phase where we would become post-human, where we would eventually become, because of technology, we could become immortal. We would conquer death. We would conquer all the health problems, all the sicknesses. We would have super intelligent brains, etc. So we're in a trans stage at the moment between being human and being post-human. And there's a lot of things that are connected with that. The idea of uploading your brain to computers and living in computer-generated worlds, computer-simulated worlds, perhaps on other planets. So it sounds very science fiction, and it is, but there are a lot of people that, and a lot of the EAs that have bought into this philosophy as well. So Nick Bostrom is going to bring his calculations to the EA movement, and now they are going to consider that the main altruistic need for humanity is to stop any existential threats. The worst thing that could happen to humans is that we die out, because it will affect, as we spoke about earlier, trillions of people that are going to live in the future. They love their parables. So in this book, Nick Bostrom tells the parable of the sparrows. The sparrows are building nests, they're having trouble, and they think, wouldn't it be good if we could get an owl to help us? Owls are so wise, they could protect us. And there's this one-eyed sparrow saying, I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should train the owl before we get the owl to work for us. And the sparrows don't listen. They go, no, 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 we'll get the owl and then we can worry about that later. So you know how the story ends for the sparrows. So he takes that parable and applies it to artificial intelligence. The idea that computers will get so smart that they can actually create other computers and they will have no need for humans other than to use their brains if there's any potential use for a person's brains. Otherwise, there won't be any use for humans. So these are the things, as we said earlier, that keep them up late at night. In 2009, Nick Bostrom wrote a paper that argued that a non-existential disaster causing the breakdown of global civilization is, from the perspective of humanity as a whole, a potentially recoverable setback, a giant massacre for man, but a small misstep for mankind. So little things that happen now, like World War II or Ukraine, they're just blips on the radar. He said, we find that the expected value of reducing existential risk by a mere 1/1000000000th of 1/1000000000th of 1 percentage point, there's a lot of maths in this. So if we could reduce existential risk by 1/1000000000th of 1/1000000000th of 1 percentage point, it's worth 100 billion times as much as saving 1 billion lives today. So I hope that didn't do your head in. But if we could reduce existential risk by 0.00000000001 today, that's 1 billion more times effective than saving 1 billion lives today. So human beings get quantified. That's basic utilitarianism. Human beings are just boxes of utility. And it might be that we can suffer 1 billion deaths today, as long as that we're working towards saving 1 trillion lives in a few billion years. And maths doesn't lie. So the EA movement is essential to understand how long-termism developed. William McCaskill is going to write a book called, first of all, a paper called Strong Long-Termism. And then he will write a book that came out this year, 2022. And it's called What We Owe the Future. This was heavily marketed. It was every major news outlet either did a review of it or interviewed him, whether it's the Washington Post, New York Times, all of them. What We Owe the Future, which was essentially selling a mild version of long-termism that would be suitable for the public. You have to read their papers to understand how far they take strong long-termism. Strong long-termism is that the majority of our work, our priority should be to stop existential risks. Don't worry about world hunger. We can do that, but it's not really the major concern. I'll just read a little bit of McCaskill. He said, the idea is then that for the purposes of evaluating actions, we can in the first instant often simply ignore all the effects contained in the first 100 or even 1,000 years, focusing primarily on the further future effects. He goes on to say, and I'm missing it, that anything that happens today really is a rounding error. So if you think of, if you've got a decimal number like 7.1654327, what we do is we round off to 6 digits. So we would, so what is happening today is totally inconsequential. We just round that off. It's a rounding error. World War II rounding error. If we think of the history of mankind as a book, we're on the first page. So all our efforts and priorities should go into protecting the long-term future. So this is essentially this is the philosophy behind EA and effective altruism and long-termism. What we next need to look at is how it has affected the tech industry. This is what happens when you take God out of the equation. People want to do what is morally good, and they will work out ways to do it that leaves God and emotions, because emotions are not considered intelligent, out of the equation. Then you have to replace that with something. And what they have replaced it is with mathematics, basically. Logic, reason, a lot of mathematical equations to come up with what is the most effective way. So we'll stop here for time, but in 2012, William McCaskill met a young man called Sam Bankman-Fried and counseled him to look for a job that he could make the most amount of money so that he could be an effective altruist. And he went into cryptocurrency. And if you've been living under a rock, you would have missed what's been happening this last 3-4 weeks with the crash of FTX, that cryptocurrency exchange. 1 million people have lost their money. At least 1 million people have lost their savings and super, but there's others that have lost big money that can afford to lose big money, but a lot of people that couldn't afford to lose it. So he, SBF, bought into effective altruism, and where he was funneling his profits, he was, I think he had something like 26 billion, he was a billionaire, he was funneling that into research into artificial intelligence and other things as well, that we might take a look at him at some stage. But he was the poster boy of the EA movement. So in closing, any questions so far? Oh, we've got some hands up. Graham.
With the example that was given before about the mathematical equation to give, how it was first directed to women for the, I can't remember the word that you're using, for the illness that they were suffering from.
The Fistula Foundation.
Yes. So maths, as you said, doesn't lie, and as they quoted, doesn't lie. But if you've got, it's based on parameters. So the information that you're entering into this program that allows you to determine what is the best way to spend the money, if that was based on a patriarchal society, wouldn't that sway the numbers to also keep that money headed in a way that benefits further a patriarchal society? Does that make sense?
Yes, and that is one of the criticisms of them, is that, see, they're giving not because of emotion, but they are actually giving to feel good, to get the warm, fuzzy feeling. So the more effective they are, the more the maths adds up, the bigger the warm, fuzzy feeling, right? That they're kidding themselves. So but in doing the maths, in trying to be effective from a rational reasoning, they what's I going to say? Oh, I lost my train of thought. I was heading somewhere. Sorry, Graham. What did you say again?
I was just asking whether the numbers that they had to enter into this algorithm that told them the best place to spend their money, this is obviously skewed by patriarchal. I'll stop there. You've got your thought.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Is they're not dealing with the systemic problems. It is a feel good. And they're not dealing with things with corruption or patriarchy or, you know, racism, sexism, all those things. As long as there's a lot of what they do is say buy mosquito nets, because so that children, adults won't get malaria, which that sounds good. And I mean, it is good, but it's basing it on mathematical equations when they go to countries to give those bed nets. So that, take Peter Singer, right? Do I save this child in the pond here? Or can I save, with that same money, I could probably save 5 children for the cost of my suit and shoes in a third world country. But what if, to save that child in a third world country, I had to give I had to kill a person to save 5 kids by giving the government guns. So international aid is complicated. You have to deal with corruption. There's a lot, that is another rabbit hole to go down, is the problem with international aid. And you put aid into Syria. The biggest refugee camp in the world, I think, is in Syria. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's big anyway. The government takes 50% off the top. So you can do the math where it looks like you're benefiting a whole heap of people, but what's going on behind the scenes, that's not really what's taken into account, because it's not what they believe is it's top down. We're the smart ones. We determine where the money goes. That's not human rights. Human rights is listening to the people saying, we have the needs. Please listen to us. We'll tell you where it's best spent. The people in the country, the people, individuals in need know the experts to know what their needs are. And there's so many examples of bad international aid where the locals just haven't been considered. So, and just to continue on from your point, Graham, with the math, is what the math that they're using is to do with probabilities. It's a counterfeit of what we do. They're predicting. In long-termism, they're predicting, but they're predicting based on probabilities. You can't predict based on a probability. Probability is not predictability. Prophecy is predictable. Maths and probability isn't. But they've turned these probability calculuses into a form of prophecy of what could happen, will happen, might happen, and it's not it's not reasonable either. But people are buying into these they get hypnotized by the math. It really looks impressive. So the math draws the brain and they get wowed, and then they work out what's so effective, and that gives the warm and fuzzy feeling. And if you're a billionaire and you're, millionaire, you've got a lot of money and you want to have that, warm and fuzzy feeling, then let's put it into, don't worry about world hunger, don't worry about the floods in Pakistan, don't worry about that, because that's inconsequential. That is a rounding error. But I could put it into a think tank that is working on all the problems to do with AI, and a lot of people having fun with computer simulations, and I can feel really good about myself. I can feel I'm not only doing something that is morally good, I am doing the best moral thing that can be done, because that's what the numbers tell me. So what we're seeing down here is a combination of Nick Bostrom's thoughts regarding philosophies regarding artificial intelligence, post-humanism, combined with effective altruism, and they're building this castle in the sky that's pretty much starting to come down because of the cryptocurrency collapse, but it's still. So this book that Bostrom wrote in 2014, who wrote the foreword for it? Bill Gates. Who recommended and tweeted it? Elon Musk. And put $1 million into his foundation, the Future for Humanity Foundation. So this is where, you know, big money is going. So just talking about counterfeit, we can see the counterfeit in the 10%. That's an easy one. But we're also long-termists, aren't we? We're long-termists. We're thinking of eternity. We're planning for eternity. So we're planning for post-humanism, when this mortal puts on immortality and this corruption puts on incorruption. What they're doing is really counterfeiting what God's kingdom is going to provide for. Graham, you've got your hand up a couple of times. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
No, that's from something previous. Thank you.
Thank you. And Molly?
No, I was just thinking how they're smart in the counterfeit using mathematics. You know, because math doesn't lie, and to them, as long as the numbers add up, it gives them good feelings. But not knowing the fraud and everything else that happened behind the scene, it sounds like a very complicated plan of salvation.
Yes, because life is complicated and giving is complicated. And we need all, and intelligence is complicated. It's not just rationality. We'll look at that in the future as well. So what we've done is we've just kind of just followed through the development of the philosophy and how we've ended up with long-termism, and you can't separate long-termism from effective altruism. It was only a few months ago that this was really not in mainstream media. It was some people called it the most dangerous philosophy that nobody knows about, until the collapse of FTX. And now, so we might continue on that. So it was gaining, especially with this book, it was getting a lot of good publicity. New York Times, Vox, Washington Post was the only one that really had articles saying there's something not right here. So, but there were other papers that were buying in to this religion. So, if nobody else has anything, any comments, any closing comments or questions? So we're jumping into Dragon and this movement that is under the umbrella of the Dragon Power, spiritualism, which is another counterfeit of God's kingdom. Just looks a little different to the counterfeit. They dress in different clothes, go to different schools, but counterfeit's a counterfeit. So it's just a different child, but it's has the characteristics of the parent as well. So on that note, we will close in prayer. And Molly, would you close in prayer for us this evening?
Loving God, we are so thankful that we have just finished our study, and we thank that you have gathered us all together in this opening Sabbath to study more and to know, Lord, what the world are doing and also, Lord, to understand what the movement are doing. And I thank you that you have guided Elder Terrie in the thoughts and the study for tonight. And I pray that you may continue to bless her with wisdom, and also the elders, Elder Tess and Elder Pamiras, and all the leaders around the world. I pray also, Lord, for the member of the movement, that we are being encouraged, and may we continue to study hard and learn the message as you have given us to prepare us, Lord, for the great work ahead. And I pray that you may be with each and every one of us tonight as we rest for tomorrow to continue our study. And I thank you that you have heard us. In Jesus' wonderful name, amen.